Today, I'm going to show you everything that I do to replace the fans on the back of this Aero 15 OLED Gigabyte laptop. Amazon affiliate links to the fans I'm using today will be in the video description. I've also got a link below to my iFixit tool set. There's tons of bits that are super specialized. I like to disconnect the battery before I do anything else. Next, we're going to remove the fan chassis. Looks like most of these, if not all of them, are Phillips head screws. This little grabber tool, I don't think it came with my iFixit kit. I threw one in my kit because I reach for it a lot. Make sure to look under this tape. There's another screw hidden here. Next, we're going to unlock the fan chassis because this is actually also the heatsink. You've got to remove these little rubber squares from the tops of each of these locking points. They're going to look like screw heads, and you can just turn them counterclockwise. They'll loosen and eventually unlock from the motherboard. Now be careful with these because I noticed I had a little bit of difficulty loosening some of them. And if you're having that difficulty, you might want to change the bit you're using. This is the one I was using to unbolt the regular Phillips screws, but this one is working way better for the spring-loaded screws that are locking the chassis to the motherboard. So just test out, rather than putting a ton of pressure and stripping out screw heads, make sure that you're testing out the best bit for each task here on the motherboard. The next thing I'm going to do is free up these wires here so that I can more freely remove the fan chassis. You want to remove everything slow because if you haven't disconnected, there are two more connection points here on the motherboard to disconnect. When you turn this over, you're going to see these strips of heatsink compound. These come in rolls. If some of this comes off messed up and you feel like you want to replace it, you can cut new pieces and put it in there. I'll also have a link in the description below for the compound that I use. On this project, I'm trying to reuse what's here, make sure it's clean enough. That's totally your call. I just don't feel like doing it, honestly. I'm willing to take the risk. But if you do have to replace this stuff, take a picture of it so you remember and know exactly where you need to put each new piece of compound. Sometimes you'll have it stick here to the motherboard, like this piece. That's fine. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to try not to let it get dirty or dusty while this is open. The next thing I'm going to do is clean the heatsink compound off of both the GPU and CPU, as well as the heatsink here on the back of the fan chassis. Be careful about using paper towel on components like this. It can leave fibers behind, which can impede the thermal conductivity. What I like to do is use a piece of microfiber. There's probably better ways. This video is not about cleaning off thermal paste. This is how I did it. You can check out other videos and decide which way is best for you. Once I clean the thermal paste off of the fan chassis heat sinks, we can flip it over and take out these little screws that hold the fans in place. I like to do this kind of holding it like this because I don't want to damage the thermal tape on my work surface. Okay, the fans have been removed. As you can see, there's a lot of dust. I've got dogs. There's a little bit of dog hair in here. Go ahead and clean all this up best you can. Again, try not to leave any dust behind from using paper towel. I want to get as much of this clean as possible because I don't like reassembling with dirty equipment. Plus, you get a little bit more performance out of it if you start fresh and clean again. All right, I've got it cleaned up to my satisfaction. Go ahead and do this to the point where you are satisfied. That said, I'm gonna open up the new fans and get them installed. There are little guide pins here that you can use to make sure you are setting and positioning the fan properly onto the heatsink. This is where they probably tell you to use some kind of tape to hold these on, because when you flip it over, if you're not holding them properly, they will fall off. I'm just gonna go ahead and do it like this, but feel free to get this done however you see fit. Now that I've got one screw in on each fan, I can go ahead and get the rest in without worrying about the fans falling out. These are super tiny screws, so if you are having trouble finding a bit that works for these, again, check out my link to the iFixit kit. It's not the only kit, obviously, that has bits for things like this. It's just a super high quality kit that I've been using for years. I really love it. Anytime I've ever reached for a bit for any electronic component, it's never failed me. I've always had a bit in there that did the job. So just throwing that out there. There are links to it in the video description below. All right, there you have it. Nice new fans installed. Keep in mind, everybody, I cannot vouch for the fan manufacturer. I don't know how these are going to perform. They claim to be made for this laptop and they seem to be reasonably priced. We're gonna go ahead and give them a try. But if you find something better than this, please put that in the comments below. Let us all know. Okay, so the chips are clean, the motherboard's clean, the heatsink is clean. It's time to put some thermal paste on and get this thing reassembled. I'm using Arctic Silver. You don't have to use that. This video, again, is not about thermal paste, applying it, what are the best kinds. This is what I'm using. I'll have links to it in my video description. If you want to recommend something better or something different, please do that in the comments below. Now, I'm not 100% sure where the chips are going to land when I reinstall this. You can kind of see where the chips used to be, so I'm going to try to use that as a guide. I think on this heatsink, I'm a little bit more confident on where the chip is going to be, but I'm going to spread it a little bit past where I see the old chip kind of leaving its mark, just to be safe. And I'm going to probably go almost edge to edge on this, again, because I don't know exactly where the chip is going to land. We're also going to apply a very thin layer to the chip itself, and then we'll be done. This isn't the best thermal paste job in the world. I used a thermal paste spreader. We're gonna go with it. I'm gonna go ahead and get some paste on the CPU and GPU. All right, it's not the best thermal compound job in the world, but I think it's gonna get it done. Again, if you guys have recommendations on that stuff, go ahead and throw it in the comments below. Let's go ahead and get the fan chassis and heatsink reinstalled. So you have to kind of watch out for these wires. Make sure you're kind of feeding them over and around the fan. And when you get ready to push this thing down onto the motherboard, you got one shot at this. You're gonna mess up your thermal paste. Okay, so get it as best lined up as you can. Looking at all the different screws, it's kind of maybe a little bit hard to show, but there are those screw holes for the ones that lock into the motherboard. Those are probably the most important in my opinion. And I also try to get the fan, like up here, the fan blades kind of locked into place, or at least lined up first, and kind of come in like this on an angle, so that I'm really confident that when I set this thing down, it's gonna lay right where it needs to be. Because again, we don't want to move things around with that heatsink compound on there. If you do, and you have to redo it, it's not a big deal. If you mess up setting this thing down, you can always pull it back off. It's a little bit of a pain. You got to clean off thermal compound and then reapply it, but then you can give yourself another shot. So basically right now, what I'm doing is I'm making sure that there are no obstructions preventing the wires from being realigned, plugged in, basically set back where they're supposed to be, because you don't want to screw everything down and find out you've got a wire obstruction and then you've got to unscrew everything just to free it up. It looks like I'm okay. It looks like everything's gonna run the way I want it to. So we're gonna go ahead and lock this thing in to the motherboard. So what I like to do is put pressure here where the two chips are, steady, solid, even pressure, and I start to lock in the mounting points. These are the points that hold the pressure onto the chips for thermal dynamics and cooling purposes. So this is your most important area, and then I'll finish up by getting the outer stuff. So I'm going to start to apply pressure here and lock in my chipsets. I'm holding even pressure the entire time. And what I'm doing is I'm getting like a preliminary amount of pressure on each of these. And then I'm gonna go through and kind of torque it down a little bit. You gotta be careful with this stuff. You don't want to break or strip anything out. I don't know how to describe to you the right amount of torque other than I've been doing things like this for years and I've just got kind of a feel for it. And I kind of know where I want to go without breaking anything, and at the same time making sure there's enough pressure on it to hold it in place so it can do the job that it needs to do. I feel good about these CPU and GPU mounting points, so I'm going to go ahead and get the fan chassis screwed in here along the outside. Watch out, there's a wire here that it's going to get pinched if I don't move it out of the way. There we go. Let's go ahead and reroute the wires back to where they were so that they're out of the way. And you really want to make sure you get them pressed back into their original position, because when you go to put the laptop chassis back together, you don't want the wires getting pinched in some place they're not supposed to be. There's an example here where the wire really needs to get pushed underneath these clips so that it's completely out of the way. Now we're going to hook up the fan power cable to the motherboard. Here's power for the other fan here. Don't forget to put these little rubber grommets back on the top of the screws that were used to lock in the heatsink to the motherboard. Here's one without. We still need to install it. Here's one with the rubber grommet on top. Keep in mind these things have just a little bit of stickiness to them on one side. It's just enough that if you don't get it dusty and dirty, you should be able to stick it back on. And then the heat and the pressure from having the whole unit back together will re-solidify that piece of rubber back to the top of those screws a little bit more securely than what they are right now. Don't forget to reinstall your battery power cable. And be careful with these wires. If you look down in here, there is kind of a sharp piece of metal. I think it's the chassis that holds the battery in place. You don't want to stuff those down in there too hard or up against that piece of metal. You don't want to shear off any of the shielding on the wires because that's likely to short something out. So I just kind of like gently press these kind of flat a little bit so that these aren't going to get caught anywhere. Quick tip while you've got the hood open on this thing, if you want to upgrade your hard drives, they're right here. I went ahead and did that with two 4 terabyte drives. I've got 8 terabytes on this thing now. I'm super happy with the Samsung Pro Series. This is the 990 model. There's a lot of other models out there. I'll throw a few of the links below to my favorite ones, but I've had really good luck with the Samsung M.2s in the past, and so that's what I chose to go for this laptop. All right, I think we're ready to install the back cover. it turns out there are two different lengths of screw. I don't 100% know which needs to go where, but I'm gonna make the assumption that the shorter ones go up front here because these are the most shallow holes, and I'm putting the longer ones in the other holes. If somebody knows better, please let us know in the comments below, but just be forewarned, I do not know 100% what that correct answer is. So I'm gonna go ahead with this assumption for my laptop here, but you need to make your own decisions on what you think is best. All right, everything's been reinstalled. Let's go ahead and fire it up. All right, so far so good. I hear the fans running super quietly. We're gonna go ahead and fire up the Gigabyte control center. Let's go ahead and turn these fans up to their maximum. Listen to those bad boys cook. These things are blowing out some serious air. They sound really good. I mean, they're loud. This is just what fans sound like when they're at 100%. I don't hear any crunching noises. They're performing the way I would expect. Personally, I like to do a burn-in because we did put new thermal paste on these chips, and I would like to really crank up the heat. I'm gonna run a benchmark, something that's just going to max out the CPU and the GPU at least one time. There are probably some other videos out there from folks that'll talk about how to properly do a burn-in. If that's something that concerns you, then I would go ahead and look that up and do it to your satisfaction. For me, I'm gonna go ahead and run 3D Mark, and I'm just gonna let it max out the CPU and the GPU. Then I'm gonna turn the laptop off, let it cool down, fire it back up, and let it come back up to temperature. Aside from that, everybody, the fans are installed, everything looks good. Hopefully this helped you out. Let me know in the comments below if it did, or if you have any other suggestions, and make sure to check out my Amazon affiliate links in the video description. If there's anything that I've used here today in this video that might help you, please go ahead and use those. It supports the channel and helps me out a ton. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.